They said she was finished. James Thorne, the man she had loved since college, didn't just divorce her, he incinerated her reputation, stole her life's work, and left her penniless on the rainy streets of Chicago. He told the press, "Emily is unstable. She'll never recover." He truly believed that she was destined to be nothing more than a cautionary tale. But fate has a wicked sense of humor. 3 years later, as the heavy gold doors of the obsidian Gala swung open, the entire room went silent. James, standing there with his stolen empire, didn't just drop his champagne glass. He froze in absolute terror. Because the woman walking down the grand staircase wasn't just a guest. She was the billionaire heiress's new partner, and she held the one thing that could destroy him, the truth. The sound of a heavy oak door slamming shut has a finality to it that echoes in your bones. For Emily Vance, that sound was the punctuation mark at the end of her life as she knew it. It was a Tuesday in November, the kind of Chicago evening where the wind cuts through your coat like a serrated knife. Emily stood on the sidewalk outside the brownstone she had paid for, staring at the closed door. Beside her feet were 3 cardboard boxes. They were wet at the bottom, soaking up the slush from the gutter. "James, please," she screamed, her voice cracking. She hated herself for begging, but desperation makes you do ugly things. "My portfolio is in there. The Helios blueprints. You can't keep them." The door opened just a crack. James Thorne, wearing a cashmere sweater that cost more than Emily's first car, looked out. His face wasn't angry. That would have been easier to handle. His face was bored. "There are no blueprints, Emily," James said smoothly. "You're hysterical. You've been under a lot of stress. I told the board you were taking a sabbatical for your mental health. They agreed it was best if I took lead on the project." "You stole them," she whispered, the cold reality settling in her chest. "You changed the digital signatures. You erased my backups." "I optimized them," James corrected, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "You always had the vision, Emily, but you lacked the killer instinct. I'm doing us both a favor. You go. Get help. I'll build the empire." He tossed a check onto the wet pavement. It fluttered down, landing in a puddle of oil and dirty water. "Severance. Don't come back." The door slammed again. The lock clicked. And just like that, Emily Vance, the true genius behind Thorne architecture, was erased. Flash forward 2 years. The clinking of silverware against fine china was a sound Emily had learned to tune out. She adjusted the heavy tray on her shoulder, navigating the crowded floor of the Gilded Cage, an upscale jazz lounge in downtown Manhattan. She wasn't Emily the architect anymore. She was just Ellie, the waitress who was quick with a refill and didn't make eye contact with the clientele. Her hands, once used for drafting complex geometric structures, were now rough from detergent and sanitizer. "Table 4 needs a bottle of Dom Chop Chop," the manager, a sweaty man named Rick, barked at her as she passed the bar. Emily nodded, keeping her head down. She moved toward table 4, the VIP booth in the corner. As she approached, a laugh rang out, a laugh that made her blood turn to ice. She froze. The tray trembled in her hand. Sitting there, surrounded by sycophants and hangers-on, was James. He looked better than ever. Success suited him. He was wearing a bespoke suit, his hair perfectly coiffed. One arm draped casually around a woman who looked like a supermodel. This was Vanessa Caldwell, the daughter of a steel magnate. James's ticket to the big leagues. Emily wanted to run. She wanted to drop the tray and flee out the back door. But she needed this job. Her rent was late and her mother's medical bills were piling up. She took a deep breath, steeling herself, and stepped into the lion's den. "Champagne," she said, her voice low and unrecognizable. She kept her face angled away, focusing on popping the cork. "About time," James said, not even looking at her. He was too busy boasting. "The Sterling merger is practically a done deal, Vanessa. Once I get the old hag to sign off on the waterfront project, Thorne Enterprises will own the skyline." "You're so brilliant, James," Vanessa cooed, tracing a finger down his lapel. "It's not just brilliance," James said, swirling his glass. "It's about knowing when to trim the fat. You know my ex-wife. She tried to claim she designed the Helios Tower." The table erupted in laughter. The crazy one of his associates asked, completely delusional. James sighed, playing the victim perfectly. Sad, really. I heard she's working at a gas station in Ohio or something. Emily's hand shook. A splash of champagne spilled onto the pristine white tablecloth. The table went silent. You clumsy idiot! Vanessa shrieked, jumping back. That's vintage Chanel. James looked up, annoyance flashing in his eyes. He looked at the waitress's hands, first red chap shaking. Then he looked at her face. For a second there was no recognition. Then his eyes widened. The arrogance faltered, replaced by a shock that quickly morphed into vicious amusement. Emily! The name hung in the air like a curse. Oh my God! James laughed, a sound of pure incredulity. Ohio was too generous. You're waiting tables here. I'm working, James, Emily said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the pounding in her ears. Something you wouldn't know how to do without stealing someone else's work. The table gasped. James's face darkened. He stood up, looming over her. Manager, he shouted. Rick came running over, sweating profusely. Mr. Thorne, is there a problem? This woman, James pointed a manicured finger at Emily, was rude, spilled a drink on my fiancé, and is harassing us. Get her out of my sight, now. Ellie, you're fired, Rick said, instantly grabbing her arm. Get your stuff. But, go! Emily looked at James one last time. He was smirking, raising his glass in a mock toast. Recovery doesn't look good on you, darling. She didn't cry. Not there. She ripped her apron off, threw it on the floor, and walked out the back exit into the alleyway. It was raining again. It always seemed to be raining when James destroyed her life. The alley behind the gilded cage was a narrow cobblestone throat of the city, choked with dumpsters and the smell of old fryer grease. Emily leaned against the wet brick wall, letting the freezing rain wash over her face. She was 32 years old, brilliant, and she had just lost her minimum wage lifeline. Stupid, she whispered to herself, hitting the back of her head against the brick. Stupid pride. She was about to head toward the subway when she heard a noise. It wasn't the scuttling of a rat. It was a human sound. A whimper. Emily paused. The city had hardened her, but it hadn't killed her heart. She squinted into the gloom further down the alley. Near the overflowing recycling bin, a figure was slumped over. It looked like a pile of rags at first. As Emily stepped closer, she saw it was an elderly woman. She was dressed in a heavy, tattered wool coat that had seen better decades, wearing a scarf wrapped tightly around her head. She was frantically digging through a pile of wet cardboard boxes, her hands trembling violently. Ma'am? Emily called out softly. The woman jumped, clutching her chest. She turned around. Her face was pale, her lips blue from the cold. She looked frail, like a gust of wind could shatter her. My pin, the woman rasped. She had a strange accent, clipped and refined, though her voice was weak. I dropped it. It rolled under here, please. It's all I have left of him. Most people would have walked away. A crazy old lady digging in the trash in a dark alley, that was a recipe for getting mugged or stabbed. But Emily saw the terror in the woman's eyes. It was the same look Emily had felt on her own face 2 years ago when the door slammed shut. Okay, Emily said, dropping her bag. Let me help. It's too cold for you to be down there. Emily got down on her hands and knees on the filthy, wet pavement. The water soaked through her jeans instantly. She didn't care. She began shifting the heavy, sodden boxes of liquor bottles. What does it look like? Emily asked. A bird, the woman whispered, shivering violently. A phoenix, gold, with a ruby eye. Emily dug deeper. Broken glass sliced her palm, but she ignored the sting. She felt around in the muck, her fingers numb. Is this it? She pulled out a small, mud-caked object. She wiped it on her sleeve. Even in the dim light of the street lamp, it glittered. It was a phoenix, intricately detailed with a ruby that looked disturbingly real for a piece of costume jewelry. The old woman let out a sob, snatching it with shaking hands. You found it! You found it! She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She slumped against the dumpster, gasping for air. Her skin was gray. "You're freezing," Emily realized. The woman was going into hypothermia. Emily didn't think twice. She took off her own coat, a cheap but warm puffer jacket, and wrapped it around the old woman's shoulders. Then she pulled out her thermos from her bag. It still had lukewarm tea in it. "Drink this," Emily commanded gently. The woman drank, her eyes fixed on Emily. They were sharp eyes, strikingly blue against her wrinkled face. You gave me your coat. You're shivering." "I'm young," Emily said, rubbing her arms. "I can run to the train. You need this more." "You were crying earlier," the woman observed. She wasn't missing anything. "Why," Emily let out a bitter laugh. "Just a bad night. Ran into an ex-husband who likes to remind me that I'm nothing." "And are you nothing?" Emily looked up at the sliver of sky between the buildings. "I used to design skyscrapers. I used to dream in steel and glass. Now I just got fired for spilling champagne on a suit I couldn't afford in 10 lifetimes. So yeah, maybe he's right." The old woman fingered the phoenix pin. She looked at Emily, really looked at her as if she was measuring the structural integrity of a building. "He sounds like a fool," the woman said. Her voice was suddenly stronger. "And fools build on sand." "I should get you a cab," Emily said, checking her phone. "Where do you live? Is there a shelter?" The woman smiled a cryptic, thin smile. "No shelter. I have a ride coming. But I need you to do something for me." "What?" The woman reached into the pocket of her tattered dress underneath Emily's coat and pulled out a business card. It was thick black cardstock with gold embossing. But it wasn't a business name. It was just an address on 5th Avenue and a time. Tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. "My name is Sarah Fiel," the woman said. "Bring me my coat tomorrow, and bring your portfolio." "My portfolio?" Emily blinked. "I told you I don't." "A woman who digs in the mud for a stranger's memory has an eye for detail," Sarah Fiel said. "And a woman who gives her coat to a beggar has a spine of steel. I want to see what you can build." Before Emily could ask another question, a car turned into the alley. It wasn't a police car or a taxi. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, sleek and black as midnight. The driver, a mountain of a man with a scarred jaw, jumped out and opened the rear door. He didn't look at Sarah Fiel with disgust for her rags. He bowed his head with immense respect. "Madam Sterling," the driver said, "we were worried when you slipped away from security." Sterling, Emily's breath hitched. Sarah Fiel Sterling. The matriarch of the Sterling shipping dynasty. The woman known as the Iron Ghost, because she hadn't been seen in public for a decade. The old woman climbed into the car, but before the door closed, she looked back at Emily, who was standing frozen in the rain. 9:00 a.m. "Emily," Sarah Fiel said, "don't be late. We have an empire to topple." Emily didn't sleep that night. She spent the entire night in her tiny, drafty studio apartment digging through her digital archives. James had wiped the main servers, but he had been arrogant. He didn't know about the physical sketchbooks. She kept the raw, hand-drawn concepts that predated the CAD files. She pulled them out from under her bed. The Helios project. The graceful curves, the wind turbine integration, the eco-glass structure. It was all there. Her soul on paper. At 8:45 a.m. she stood in front of the address on the card. It wasn't an office building. It was a pre-war mansion on 5th Avenue that looked like a fortress. The windows were dark. There was no doorman, just a camera with a red blinking eye. Emily buzzed. "Name," a voice crackled. "Emily Vance. I'm here to see Sarah Fiel." The heavy iron gate clicked and swung open automatically. She walked through a courtyard filled with statues that looked vaguely threatening and entered the main hall. It was cavernous, filled with covered furniture. It smelled of lavender and old money. "In the conservatory," a voice echoed. Emily followed the sound to the back of the house. She entered a massive glass room filled with exotic orchids. Sitting at a small wrought iron table was Seraphiel. Gone were the rags. She was wearing a sharp navy blue power suit that looked like armor. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun. "You're 3 minutes early," Seraphiel said without looking up from her tea. "Good. Punctuality is the courtesy of kings." "Mrs. Sterling," Emily said, clutching her portfolio against her chest. I didn't realize who you were last night." "That was the point." Seraphiel gestured to a chair. "Sit. Do you know why I was in that alley, Emily?" "No, ma'am." "Because I am dying." Seraphiel said it as casually as discussing the weather. Emily froze. "Not today and not tomorrow." Seraphiel continued, taking a sip of tea. "But soon enough. I have no children. My board of directors is a pack of hyenas waiting for me to fall so they can strip my company for parts. They want to merge with a trendy modern firm to revitalize the brand." Seraphiel looked up, her blue eyes piercing. "They are pushing for a merger with Thorne Enterprises." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. "James?" "He has charmed them," Seraphiel said with a scowl. "He showed them plans for a building called the Helios. He claims it will revolutionize green energy in urban centers. My board is eating it up. They want to announce the partnership at the Obsidian Gala in 3 months. Seraphiel reached out a bony hand. "Show me." Emily opened her portfolio. She laid out the sketches. The original dates were stamped on the bottom of the pages, dates that were 3 years old. Seraphiel studied them in silence. She traced the lines of the drawing with her finger. She looked at the calculations Emily had scribbled in the margins, calculations about wind load and thermal dynamics that James's shiny renders would never show. "He didn't just steal the look," Seraphiel murmured. "He stole the soul of the building. But he doesn't understand the engineering, does he?" "No," Emily said, finding her voice. "The spinal truss system is complex. If he tries to build it based on the renders alone without the core load-bearing math I developed, it won't be stable. He's selling a facade." Seraphiel closed the book. She looked at Emily. "I made my fortune in shipping Miss Vance. I know how to spot a vessel that will sink." Seraphiel stood up and walked to the glass wall, looking out at the garden. "I need a successor. Not a corporate shark, but a builder. Someone who understands that a legacy is built on stone, not sand. And I need someone to save my company from that charlatan." She turned back to Emily. "I am offering you a job, but not as an architect, not yet." "Then what?" Emily asked. "As my consultant." Seraphiel smiled, and it was a dangerous, predatory smile. "James Thorne thinks he is negotiating with a senile old woman. He doesn't know I have a secret weapon. You are going to guide me through these negotiations. You will tell me exactly what questions to ask to expose his incompetence. You will design the hurdles he has to jump over. We are going to let him think he has won right until the moment he steps off the ledge." "And then?" Emily asked, her heart pounding against her ribs. "And then," Seraphiel's eyes gleamed, "we take everything." The next 3 months were not a makeover. They were a resurrection. Emily moved into the guest wing of the Sterling mansion. It was a world of hushed corridors, polished marble, and an intensity that rivaled any graduate school architecture program. Seraphiel didn't just want Emily to look the part of a high society power player. She wanted Emily to internalize it. "Shoulders back," Seraphiel commanded one morning in the library. She was sitting in her wheelchair now. Her good days were becoming fewer, but her voice cracked like a whip. "You walk like you are apologizing for taking up space. Stop it. You are the smartest person in the room. Walk like you own the floorboards." Emily adjusted her posture, looking at her reflection in the gilded mirror. The exhausted waitress with the messy bun was fading. In her place was a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper jawline, dressed in tailored silk. But the real work happened in the war room, a converted study where Emily had set up her command center. Seraphil had given Emily access to the confidential correspondence between Thorne Enterprises and the Sterling board. It was worse than Emily had imagined. "Look at this," Emily said one evening, pacing around a large table covered in blueprints. "James sent over the revised structural specs for the Helios Tower yesterday. He's changed the material for the support beams." Seraphil wheeled herself over. "To what?" He switched from a titanium alloy composite to standard reinforced steel. Emily said, her voice trembling with professional rage. "He's cutting costs. He has to be. Titanium is expensive and the price has spiked. But the Helios design relies on the tensile flexibility of the alloy. If he uses steel, the building will be too rigid. The first time a high-velocity wind shear hits Chicago off the lake, the upper floors won't sway. They'll snap." "He's building a coffin," Seraphil murmured. "Does the board know?" "No. He hid the change in the appendices of a 400-page budget report. He labeled it Material Optimization. It looks like a savings of $20 million, which the board loves. But in reality, it's a death sentence for anyone inside that building during a storm." "He is reckless," Seraphil said, her eyes narrowing. "He's desperate," Emily corrected. She pulled up a financial dossier she had compiled. "I did some digging into Thorne Enterprises' public filings. James is leveraging everything he has on this merger. He bought a private island, a fleet of cars, and that ring for Vanessa. He's cash poor. If the Sterling deal falls through, he defaults on 3 massive loans. He needs your money to actually build the tower." Then Seraphil smiled a cold, terrifying expression. "Then let's turn up the heat. I want you to draft a response to his proposal. Ask him about the material optimization. Use technical jargon he won't understand. Force him to consult his engineers. Let's see him squirm." For the next few weeks, Emily became a ghost haunting James Thorne. She dictated emails that Seraphil signed. She tore apart his designs, questioned his timelines, and demanded safety audits. Every time James replied, his tone became more frantic. He couldn't understand why the senile old woman he thought he was manipulating suddenly knew about load-bearing vectors and wind tunnel harmonics. "He's cracking," Emily said one afternoon, reading an email where James angrily insisted that his vision shouldn't be questioned by mere accountants. "Good," Seraphil said, coughing slightly into a handkerchief. "But email is too safe. It's time he faced the fire. I've scheduled a final review meeting here at the estate, next Tuesday." Emily froze. "He's coming here. I can't be seen. If he sees me, he'll know." "He won't see you," Seraphil assured her, patting Emily's hand. "But you will see him, and you will tell me exactly how to destroy him." Tuesday arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. The Sterling estate was silent, waiting. Emily was positioned in the library, but not in the open. The room had a hidden feature, a priest hole concealed behind a false bookcase, a remnant of the 1920s Prohibition era. It was small, dark, and allowed her to see into the room through a slat in the woodwork while listening via a high-fidelity speaker system. She wore a headset that connected directly to a tiny invisible earpiece in Seraphil's ear. "They're here," Max, the driver and head of security, announced over the comms. The heavy doors opened. James walked in, and the sight of him made Emily's stomach turn. But this time it wasn't fear. It was disgust. He looked tired. The confident tan was fading, and there were bags under his eyes that concealer couldn't hide. Vanessa was with him, scrolling on her phone, looking bored and out of place in the majestic, dusty library. Seraphil sat at the head of the long mahogany table, looking frail but regal. "Mr. Thorne," Seraphil said, her voice quavering slightly, an act she had perfected. "And Miss Caldwell, thank you for coming." "The pleasure is ours, Seraphil," James said, turning on the charm. He placed a leather briefcase on the table. "I trust you've had time to review the final contracts. The board is very eager to announce our partnership at the Obsidian Gala next week." "I have concerns," Seraphil said slowly. "Concerns." James's smile tightened. We've addressed every email. My team has been working around the clock. Ask him about the wind shears, Emily whispered into her headset. Her voice was calm, controlled. Seraphil tapped her finger on the table. My consultants are worried about the wind shear on the 45th floor, James. With the switch to steel, the oscillation dampening seems insufficient. James blinked. He glanced at Vanessa, then back at Seraphil. The steel is top of the line. It's actually stronger. Tell him strength isn't flexibility, Emily coached. Tell him the Tacoma Narrows Bridge was strong too. Strength is not flexibility, young man, Seraphil repeated verbatim. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge was strong. It also collapsed. James laughed nervously. That's hardly a fair comparison. Look, Seraphil, you have to trust the artist. The Helios is a masterpiece. It's my design, Emily whispered, tears pricking her eyes in the darkness of her hiding spot. He doesn't know why the curves are there. Ask him about the atrium vents. The atrium vents? Seraphil interrupted him. Why are they positioned on the north face? It seems counterintuitive for thermal regulation. James faltered. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then improvised. Aesthetics. It captures the morning light better. Liar? Emily hissed. It's for the passive cooling system. He cut the HVAC budget so the vents are critical. If he moves them for aesthetics, the building becomes a greenhouse. It will be uninhabitable in the summer. If you prioritize light over the passive cooling intake, Seraphil said, her voice hardening, dropping the frail act for a second. The tenants will roast alive in July. Did you cut the HVAC budget, James? James slammed his hand on the table. Vanessa jumped. Who are you talking to? James snapped, looking around the room paranoidly. These questions. This isn't you. You're a shipping magnate, not a structural engineer. Who is feeding you this? I do my homework, Seraphil said calmly. And your anger suggests I am right. You are cutting corners. I am managing a budget, James shouted, his face turning red. Do you want this built or not? Because without my firm, without my name, you have nothing but a dying brand and a pile of money you can't take to the grave. Vanessa put a hand on his arm. Babe, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. James shook her off. He turned back to Seraphil. The gala is in 5 days. The press releases are drafted. If you back out now, Sterling shipping stock drops 20% overnight. You need me. Seraphil looked at him for a long, silent minute. Emily held her breath. Very well, Seraphil said softly. Emily's heart stopped. What? I will sign the preliminary agreement, Seraphil said. We will announce the merger at the gala. James let out a breath, his shoulders sagging. A victorious smirk returned to his lips. You made the right choice, Seraphil. Truly. But, Seraphil added, raising a finger, I want to meet the lead architect. The one who actually drew the plans. I want to shake the hand of the genius behind the Helios. That would be me, James said, tapping his chest. I am the lead architect. Then I will see you at the gala, Seraphil said dismissively. Now get out of my house. As James and Vanessa left, James looked like a man who had survived a firing squad. He grabbed his briefcase and practically ran out the door. Emily burst out of the hidden room as soon as the main doors closed. Why did you agree? Emily cried. He's lying. He's going to ruin everything. Seraphil turned her wheelchair around. Her eyes were sparkling with mischief. I agreed to the announcement, Emily, not the contract. The contract doesn't become binding until both parties sign the digital ledger in front of the board at the gala. So. Seraphil reached out and cupped Emily's cheek. He thinks he has won. He will walk into that gala feeling invincible. He will stand on that stage and claim credit for your work in front of the entire world. And then, Seraphil whispered, you are going to walk in and take it back. We aren't just going to stop the deal, Emily. We are going to expose him, publicly, irreversibly. She handed Emily a black velvet box. Open it. Emily opened the box. Inside lay the phoenix brooch, the one she had dug out of the trash 3 months ago. It had been cleaned and polished. The gold shone like fire. The ruby eye seemed to glow. "Wear this," Seraphil said. "It is the crest of the sterling successor. When you walk into that ballroom wearing this, the board will know exactly who you are, and James will know exactly what he has lost." The night of the Obsidian Gala Chicago was blanketed in snow. The event was being held at the Grand Hall of the Art Institute, the most prestigious venue in the city. Every major news outlet was there. The paparazzi line was 3 deep. In the limousine, Emily stared at her hands. They weren't shaking. She looked different. Seraphil's team had descended upon her for 6 hours. Her hair, usually messy, was styled in sleek vintage Hollywood waves. Her makeup was sharp, accentuating her eyes. But the dress was a weapon. It was a custom-made gown of midnight blue velvet, structured and architectural, with a neckline that plunged daringly. It looked like something a queen would wear to an execution. Pinned to the left shoulder was the phoenix. "I can't believe you're not coming in with me," Emily said, looking at the empty seat across from her. Seraphil had taken a separate car. She was entering via the back entrance to prepare the board. Emily had to walk the red carpet alone. "You need to be seen," Seraphil had told her. "Not as my assistant, but as a force of nature." The car stopped. The door opened. The flashbulbs exploded like lightning. Emily stepped out. For a moment the photographers were confused. They didn't recognize her. Who was this stunning woman stepping out of the Sterling lead car? Was she a foreign dignitary? A movie star? "Who are you wearing?" a reporter screamed. Emily ignored them. She walked the carpet with the stride Seraphil had taught her, shoulders back, chin up, owning the ground. She didn't smile. She looked dangerous. Inside the grand hall, the air smelled of expensive perfume and champagne. A string quartet was playing Vivaldi. The room was packed with the city's elite billionaires, politicians, tech moguls. And in the center of it all, holding court near the ice sculpture, was James Thorne. He was in his element. He was laughing, clinking glasses, accepting preemptive congratulations. Vanessa was clinging to his arm, wearing a dress that glittered a little too much. "To the future," James toasted loud enough for the nearby circle to hear. "To Thorne Sterling Enterprises. To James," his sycophants echoed. Emily stood at the top of the grand staircase that led down into the ballroom. She waited. She waited for the music to lull between songs. Then she began to descend. The rhythmic click-clack of her heels on the marble steps cut through the ambient noise. People turned to look. First a few heads turned, then more. The sheer presence she radiated demanded attention. The midnight blue dress flowed around her like water. The phoenix brooch caught the light of the chandeliers, blazing like a red eye. The hush spread across the room like a wave. James, noticing the silence, turned around. He looked up at the staircase. His smile froze. His glass of champagne slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor with a shatter that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Emily." He mouthed the word soundless. Vanessa looked up, squinting. "Who is that? Is that the waitress?" Emily reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for her, sensing the tension. She didn't stop. She walked straight toward James. He looked as if he was seeing a ghost. His brain couldn't compute the image. This wasn't the crying woman in the rain. This wasn't the waitress in the stained apron. This was a predator. "You..." James stammered, his voice loud in the silence. "What are you doing here? Security? Someone get security?" No one moved. The crowd was too captivated. "Hello, James," Emily said. Her voice was smooth, amplified by the acoustics of the hall. "I hear you're announcing a merger tonight, based on a design called the Helios." You..." James turned red, panic setting in. "Get her out of here. She's a stalker. She's my unstable ex-wife." "Unstable." Emily tilted her head. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small folded piece of blue paper. It was an original blueprint. Is that why you kept the original drafts of the Helios in your safe? The ones with my handwriting on them? A gasp went through the room. She's lying, James screamed, stepping forward aggressively. She's a nobody. I built this company. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice boomed from the stage. Everyone turned. The spotlight hit the podium. Seraphile Sterling was there, sitting in her wheelchair, looking like an empress on a throne. She leaned into the microphone. I believe, Seraphile said, her voice echoing through the hall, that there has been a misunderstanding regarding tonight's announcement. James looked from Emily to Seraphile, his eyes wide with terror. He realized too late that the trap hadn't just sprung. He was already dead. I am not merging with Thorn Enterprises, Seraphile announced. I am acquiring it, or rather my new partner is. Seraphile extended a hand toward Emily. Everyone please meet the new CEO of Sterling Vance Architecture, the true genius behind the Helios project, Ms. Emily Vance. The room erupted. The sound of James's champagne glass shattering against the marble floor didn't just break the silence. It seemed to fracture the very reality James Thorne had constructed around himself. For 3 years he had lived in a world where he was the king, where his word was law, and where Emily Vance was nothing more than a bad memory, a stain he had scrubbed from his history. But now the stain was standing at the foot of the stairs, wearing a dress that cost more than his car, looking not like a victim, but like a judge. The 300 guests in the grand hall of the Art Institute, billionaires, senators, and tech moguls, held their breath. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the sudden sharp odor of panic. This is... James's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms wide. This is clearly a prank, a very poor taste prank. Seraphile really bringing my unstable ex-wife here to a business gala. He laughed, but it was a lonely, hollow sound. No one joined him. The crowd's eyes darted between the sweating man in the tuxedo and the cool, composed woman ascending the stairs. Security! James barked, his facade slipping. Get her out! She's trespassing. She's mentally unwell. 2 large shadows detached themselves from the wall, but they didn't move toward Emily. They moved toward the stage, crossing their arms and blocking James's path to the podium. It was Max Seraphile's head of security and his second in command. Mr. Thorne, Max rumbled, his voice low but carrying across the silent room. Please remain where you are. The presentation is just beginning. Seraphile Sterling sat on the stage in her wheelchair, her back straight, her expression unreadable. She motioned to the microphone. Emily, if you would. Emily stepped onto the platform. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked directly at James. Up close, she could see the beads of sweat gathering at his hairline. She could see the tremor in his hands. I'm not here to cause a scene, James, Emily said into the microphone. Her voice was smooth, calm, and terrifyingly reasonable. I'm here to save a building, and the people who might one day walk inside it. She clicked a small remote in her hand. The massive LED screen behind her, which had been displaying the logo of the merger, flickered and changed. A collective gasp ripped through the room. It was a blueprint. But not the glossy, sanitized 3D render James had been showing investors for months. This was a raw, technical schematic filled with complex calculus equations, stress load annotations, and handwritten notes in the margins. This, Emily said, pointing to the screen, is the original structural schematic for the Helios Tower. I drew this 3 years ago on a drafting table in our old brownstone. Lies, James screamed, stepping forward until Max held up a hand to stop him. She forged them. That's my design. Is it? Emily asked. She clicked the remote again. The image zoomed in on a specific section of the tower's spine, the 45th floor. Then perhaps, Mr. Architect, you can explain to the board of directors why you decided to alter the material specifications for the primary load-bearing trusses. The room went deadly quiet. Even the waiters stopped moving. James blinked, his eyes darting around. We optimized the materials. It's standard industry practice. You switched from a titanium alloy composite to grade B reinforced steel, Emily stated, her voice hardening. Do you know the difference, James? He didn't answer. He couldn't answer. He was a salesman, not an engineer. Titanium alloy has a flexibility modulus of 110 gigapascals, Emily explained, turning to the horrified board members sitting in the front row. It is designed to bend. Chicago is the windy city. When a high-velocity wind shear hits a building of this height off Lake Michigan, the structure must sway. If it doesn't, the kinetic energy has nowhere to go. She turned back to James. Grade B steel is rigid. It has a modulus of nearly 200. It doesn't sway, James. It snaps. She clicked the remote one more time. A simulation played on the screen. It showed the Helios Tower in a winter storm. As the wind hit the steel-reinforced section, the building didn't bend. Instead, a red fracture line appeared. The top 20 floors sheared off, collapsing into the street below. If you build this tower the way James Thorne intends, Emily said, her voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like thunder, you are not building a legacy. You are building a tomb. Mr. Henderson, the chairman of the Sterling board, stood up slowly. His face was pale. Mr. Thorne, he demanded, his voice shaking with rage. Is this true? Did you change the specs to steel? It saved $20 million? James shouted, throwing his hands up. You wanted better margins. You wanted the budget cut. I gave you what you wanted. We wanted a profit, you fool, not a mass casualty event, Henderson roared. It's not my fault. James was unraveling now, pacing frantically at the bottom of the stairs. She's sabotaging me. It doesn't matter what she says. She has no proof of ownership. I have the copyright. Actually, Sarah Field's voice cut in. She leaned forward, her frailty vanishing, replaced by the iron will of a titan of industry. That is where you are mistaken. Sarah Field nodded to Emily. We ran a forensic data recovery on the servers you wiped, James, Emily said. You thought deleting the files was enough, but you forgot about the metadata. Every line of code, every digital brushstroke on those blueprints is stamped with my user ID and dated 3 years ago. The Copyright Office received the evidence this morning. They have already revoked your filing. James looked like he had been punched in the gut. He staggered back, bumping into a waiter. But that's a civil matter, James stammered, grasping at straws. You can sue me. Fine. But the merger is set. The contracts are ready. He turned to Vanessa Caldwell, who was standing frozen nearby, clutching her clutch bag like a shield. Vanessa, tell them. We're partners. The Thorne-Sterling merger is unbreakable. Sarah Field laughed. It was a dry, dark sound. Oh, James, you really didn't read the fine print of our correspondence, did you? There is no merger. James froze. What? I am not merging with Thorne Enterprises, Sarah Field announced, her voice projecting to the back of the hall. I am acquiring its debt. The screen changed again. This time it displayed a series of financial documents. They were foreclosure notices. You leveraged everything to keep up appearances. Sarah Field narrated, reading the screen like a grocery list. To buy the land for the tower, you took out a massive high-interest loan. To buy your private island, another loan. To buy that ridiculous Rolls-Royce outside, yet another loan. She paused for effect. All of those loans were held by the Sovereign Trust Bank, which as of last week is a subsidiary of Sterling Shipping. You missed your interest payment on Tuesday, James. You defaulted. Emily stepped to the edge of the stage, looking down at the man who had left her penniless in the rain. We've called in the debt, James, Emily said softly. The bank has exercised its right to immediate seizure of assets. What? What does that mean? James whispered. It means... Emily said that Thorne Enterprises is insolvent. It means your brownstone is now property of the bank. Your island is property of the bank. Your car, your accounts, even the tuxedo on your back. It's all gone. It's over. The silence that followed was absolute. James stood in the center of the ballroom, stripped bare in front of the very people he had tried so hard to impress. He turned desperately to Vanessa. She was his last lifeline, the daughter of the steel magnate, his ticket to safety. "Nessa," he pleaded, reaching for her hand. "Baby, please. It's a trick. My lawyers will fix this. We just need to go. We can take your jet." Vanessa Caldwell looked at him. She looked at the foreclosure notice on the screen. She looked at the furious board members. And then she looked at the man she had thought was a king, now revealed to be a pauper in a stolen suit. "You spent it all," Vanessa asked, her voice shrill and piercing. "You told me you had liquid capital. You told me you were a billionaire." "I am. I will be," James begged, "just as soon as the tower is built." "The tower you stole," Vanessa scoffed. She looked down at her hand, at the massive, glittering diamond ring he had proposed with. "Is this fake too? Did you steal this?" No, that's real," James cried. "I spent the last of the company's operating fund on it. It's worth $500,000. "You embezzled corporate funds to buy jewelry," Vanessa shrieked. The realization hit her like a slap. She wasn't just dating a failure. She was an accessory to fraud. "I'm not going down with you," she hissed. She ripped the ring off her finger. With a violent motion, she threw it at him. The heavy diamond struck James in the chest and bounced away, rolling across the marble floor until it stopped at Emily's feet. "Vanessa, wait. Don't touch me." She recoiled as if he were contagious. "You loser!" She turned on her heel and stormed out of the hall, the rhythmic click of her heels echoing the departure of the last shred of James's dignity. James stood alone. The circle of guests had widened, isolating him like a diseased animal. He looked up at Emily, his eyes wet with tears of rage and humiliation. "You can't do this," he hissed, his voice trembling. "I am James Thorne. I made you. You were nothing before me, and you'll be nothing after this." "I was never nothing, James," Emily replied, her voice steady. "I was the foundation you built your life on, and you made the mistake of trying to crush the foundation." "Mr. Thorne," a deep, authoritative voice cut through the tension. James spun around. 2 uniformed police officers, accompanied by a detective in a cheap suit, had entered the hall. They walked straight through the parted crowd. "James Thorne?" the detective asked. I... James backed away, bumping into the ice sculpture. "You are under arrest," the detective stated, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Charges have been filed for corporate fraud, grand larceny, embezzlement, and reckless endangerment." "No," James whimpered as they grabbed his arms. "No, you don't understand. I'm an architect. I'm a visionary." "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recited, snapping the metal cuffs onto James's wrists. The sound was final, sharp, and brutal. As they dragged him toward the exit, James fought. He twisted his head back, locking eyes with Emily one last time. He wanted to see triumph in her eyes. He wanted to see gloating. That would have made him feel like a martyr. But there was no triumph. Emily looked at him with a cold, distant pity. It was the look one gives to a building that has been condemned, a recognition that it is broken beyond repair and must be removed for the safety of the city. "Emily!" he screamed, his voice breaking as they hauled him through the doors. "Emily!" The heavy oak doors slammed shut, cutting off his scream. The room remained silent for a heartbeat longer. Then slowly Seraphiel Sterling began to clap. It was a slow, rhythmic applause. Mr. Henderson joined in. Then the board. Then the guests. Within seconds, the grand hall was erupting in a thunderous ovation. But they weren't clapping for the drama. They were clapping for the woman standing on the stage. The woman who had walked through the fire and come out holding the blueprints to the future. 6 months later. The Chicago skyline was piercingly blue. The wind whipped off Lake Michigan, cold and biting, but on the observation deck of the newly completed Helios Tower, everything was still. Emily Vance stood by the glass railing looking out over the city. The building was a masterpiece. The titanium alloy trusses installed under her personal supervision were doing exactly what she had designed them to do. They were breathing. The massive structure swayed imperceptibly against the wind, absorbing the force rather than fighting it. It was a dance of physics and art. "It's not just a building," a voice said behind her. "It's a statement." Emily turned. Sarah Field Sterling was sitting in her wheelchair near the entrance of the deck. She looked older now, the battle with her illness taking its toll, but her eyes were still as bright as the sapphire in the phoenix brooch. "It's safe," Emily corrected, walking over to her. "That's all that matters." "It is both," Sarah Field insisted. "The architectural critics are calling it the Phoenix of Chicago. They say it rises from the skyline like a flame." She paused, a small smile playing on her lips. "Fitting, don't you think?" Emily smiled. She touched the lapel of her blazer. She was the CEO of Sterling Vance Architecture now. She had bought her old brownstone back from the bank auction, using her own money, and turned it into a shelter for women starting over. "Have you heard," Emily asked softly, "about Mr. Thorne?" Sarah Field nodded, adjusting the blanket on her lap. "The trial concluded yesterday. 5 years in federal prison. Restitution to all the investors he defrauded. He's bankrupt, Emily. When he gets out, he won't even be allowed to design a doghouse. He has been permanently disbarred from the American Institute of Architects." Emily looked back out at the city. Somewhere down there, amidst the grid of gray streets, she had once stood in the rain with 3 wet boxes and a broken heart. She had thought her life was over. She had believed him when he said she would never recover. But looking at the city from 80 stories up, the view was very different. "He tried to bury me," Emily whispered, the wind catching her words. "Yes," Sarah Field said, reaching out to take Emily's hand. "But he forgot that you were a seed." The elevator chimed. "The mayor is waiting downstairs," Sarah Field said. "It's time for the ribbon cutting. They want a photo of the woman who changed the skyline." Emily took a deep breath. She smoothed her jacket, squared her shoulders, and lifted her chin. "I'm ready," Emily said. She took the handle of Sarah Field's wheelchair, and together the architect and the matriarch moved toward the elevator, leaving the ghosts of the past to fade into the wind high above the world that had once tried to break them. And that is the story of how Emily Vance turned her deepest rock bottom into a sky-high empire. James thought he could bury her, but he forgot that you cannot bury a seed, it only grows back stronger. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how hard people try to steal your light, your talent and your truth are things that can never be faked. Karma might be slow, but as James found out, it never misses an address. What do you think? Did Sarah Field go too far, or did James get exactly what he deserved? And have you ever had a moment where someone underestimated you only for you to come back and prove them wrong? Let me know your stories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal twists and ultimate redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
He was a man who had it all, a loving, pregnant wife and a rising career. But he was willing to risk it all for a taste of glamour with his mistress. He smuggled her into the city's most exclusive charity gala, a night reserved for the absolute elite. He thought his wife, Eleanor, was at home, naive and unaware, planning their nursery. He was wrong. As he stood there, his arm around the other woman, the spotlights flared. He froze in horror as the host was announced. It wasn't just a host, it was his pregnant wife, and she owned the entire event. Arthur Vance believed he was a man perpetually on the verge of his real life starting. At 34, he was a senior portfolio manager at a mid-level financial firm in Chicago, Henderson and Locke. He had the right title, but not the right office. He had the right car, but it was leased. He had the right watch, a gleaming Breitling, but it was a convincing replica he'd bought in a back-alley shop in Hong Kong on a business trip. He was a man built of facades, and he was getting tired of holding them up. His job was a daily humiliation. He watched younger men, like Daniel Peterson, a slick-talking Ivy Leaguer, get handed the whale accounts while he was stuck managing the legacy clients, retirees who wanted to chat about their grandchildren and their 2% returns. "Vance, you've got a great touch with the over-70 crowd." His boss, James Henderson, had boomed at him last week, a backhanded compliment that felt like a slap. "They trust you." Arthur didn't want to be trusted. He wanted to be feared. He wanted to be the man who strode into a boardroom and made a single cryptic statement that shifted markets. Instead, he was the man who patiently explained what a municipal bond was for the 4th time. His wife, Eleanor Hayes, should have been his solace. Instead, she was, in his mind, the very emblem of his stagnant, safe life. They had met 3 years prior at a quiet fundraiser for the city library. Eleanor had been a volunteer, her beauty understated, her hair pulled back in a simple bun, her clothes tasteful but unremarkable. She seemed to Arthur like the perfect foundation for a successful man. She was supportive, intelligent in a bookish, non-threatening way, and possessed a quiet grace that he mistook for simplicity. When she'd told him she'd dabbled in non-profit work from a modest family inheritance, he'd pictured her organizing bake sales, not balancing multi-million-dollar ledgers. He assumed inheritance meant a paid-off suburban house, not a dynasty. Now Eleanor was 7 months pregnant with their first child, a son. The pregnancy had, in Arthur's mind, rendered her even more domestic. She was slightly swollen, often tired, and seemed perfectly, bafflingly content to discuss paint swatches for the nursery. "Arthur, do you think robin's egg blue is too predictable?" she'd asked just last night, holding up 2 nearly identical paint chips. "Or should we go with morning sky?" "They're the same, Elle. Just pick one," he'd snapped, not looking up from his phone. "I'm trying to follow the Asian markets." He wasn't. He was texting Chloe. Chloe Jenkins was the antidote to his suffocating, predictable life. She was a junior associate from the marketing department, all sharp angles, cynical laughter, and tight, expensive fabrics that broadcasted her intentions. She was a weapon, and she saw Arthur as her way into the executive suite. Their affair had started 6 months ago, a predictable cliché of stolen glances over spreadsheets and desperate, fumbling kisses in the firm's parking garage. Lately, Chloe had become demanding. "If you're serious about us, Arthur," she'd purred a few nights ago, tracing the lapel of his suit at a dim, overpriced cocktail bar. "You have to show me. I'm not a secret. I'm not some robin's egg blue little wife." Arthur had flinched at the accidental accuracy of her comment. "I know, baby. I know. It's just complicated." The pregnancy. "The pregnancy is the perfect cover," she'd countered, her eyes hard. "She's tired. She's distracted. We should be out. We should be seen. That Starlight Gala is on Friday. Everyone who is anyone will be there. The Starlight Foundation Charity Ball. It was the single most exclusive event of the Chicago social calendar. Getting a ticket was impossible. It wasn't about money. It was about invitation. The guest list was a secret, comprised only of old money families, tech billionaires, and philanthropic giants. It was held annually at the Criterion Grand Ballroom, a place of legendary opulence. "Chloe, that's impossible," Arthur had laughed. "You don't just go to the Starlight Gala. You have to be anointed." "Daniel Peterson is going," she'd said, sipping her martini. "He was bragging about it today. Henderson got him a ticket. Why not you?" That lit a fire of pure acid in Arthur's gut. "Peterson. Of course." He did?" Arthur stammered. Yep, said Henderson is on one of the committees. A plan, foolish and magnificent in its audacity, began to form in Arthur's mind. He wouldn't ask Henderson, he would just go. He would walk in, name his boss, and imply he was meant to be there. It was the kind of bold, high-stakes move he'd read about in business biographies. Fortune favors the bold. You know what? He'd said to Chloe, grabbing her hand. You're right, my boss, Henderson, is on the committee. He secured me a +1, he just hasn't given me the physical invite. It's all digital. It's us, baby. Our debut. Chloe's eyes had lit up. This was it. That evening, Arthur came home to find Eleanor addressing thick, cream-coloured envelopes at their dining room table. The scent of rosemary chicken wafted from the kitchen. "How was your day, darling?" she asked, not looking up. Her hand, slightly swollen, moved with steady, elegant precision. "Busy. Incredibly busy," he grunted, loosening his tie. "Listen, honey, that big corporate retreat I mentioned, the one for the high performers, it's been moved. It's this Friday night, mandatory attendance. It's at that big ballroom downtown, the Criterion." Eleanor paused. She looked up, her blue eyes clear and searching. "This Friday? The 14th? Yeah, I know. Terrible timing with the baby prep. I'll be home late, so don't wait up." "The Criterion," she repeated, setting her pen down. "That's a very large venue for a corporate retreat, Arthur." A prickle of irritation. "Well, it's the whole Midwest division, Eleanor. They're flying people in. Look, you don't need to worry your head about it. It's just boring speeches and bad wine." He kissed the top of her head, his mind already on the emerald green dress Chloe planned to wear. "Of course," Eleanor said, her voice soft as silk. "I'm sure it's very important. I trust you." "I trust you." The words barely registered. He retreated to his study to work, but in reality, he was texting Chloe. "Arthur, it's done. Friday night, you and me. Wear something that will make them all stare." Chloe, "You better not be lying to me, Artie. I'm buying the shoes tomorrow." Arthur, "When have I ever let you down?" He leaned back in his chair, a smug smile on his face. He felt like a king, flawlessly managing his two separate worlds. He had no idea that his polite, pregnant wife, sitting just one room away, was not just invited to the gala he was sneaking into. She was the one who had sent the invitations. The logo embossed in the corner of the heavy cardstock she was addressing was a single, elegant constellation. The logo of the Starlight Foundation. The week leading up to the gala was a masterclass in Arthur's deceit. He partitioned his life with the precision of a surgeon, a high-wire act he found intoxicating. His days were spent flattering Chloe. On Wednesday, he took her to an exclusive boutique on Oak Street, a place where the price tags were hidden and the air smelled of imported perfume. "Just put it on the company card," he'd lied to the sales associate, sliding his personal platinum card, the one linked to the joint account he shared with Eleanor, across the marble counter. The dress was a sliver of emerald silk, slit high on the thigh, with a neckline that plunged dangerously. "Is it too much?" Chloe had asked, preening in the three-way mirror. "It's perfect," Arthur had said, his voice thick. "You look like you belong." The total came to $4,800. Arthur's blood ran cold for a second, but the thrill of the gesture, the way Chloe was looking at him, quickly overrode the panic. "Eleanor never checks the statements," he reasoned. "She trusts me to handle the finances." He pictured her at home, sorting through coupons, and felt a bizarre mix of guilt and contempt. His evenings were a different performance. He would come home to Eleanor, rubbing his temples and complaining about market volatility. "You seem so stressed, Arthur," Eleanor said 2 nights before the gala, placing a cup of herbal tea on his desk. She was sitting on the floor of the study, surrounded by instruction manuals for a baby stroller. "You have no idea, Elle. This retreat, Henderson is making it sound like our entire year's bonuses depend on networking at this thing. It's all just pressure. I have to schmooze with VPs I don't even know." "Well," she said, looking up from the manual, "just be yourself. You're the smartest man in the room. They'll see that." He melted, just a little, under her genuine, uncomplicated faith. A flash of guilt shot through him, hot and sharp. Here was this good, kind woman carrying his child, and he was lying to her face. He quickly suppressed it. "This is what it takes," he told himself. "Eleanor doesn't understand the drive, the ambition. She's happy in this small world. I'm built for something bigger. This is for us, in the long run, a better life." "Thanks, honey," he said, patting her hand. "You're a saint. I'll make it up to you, I promise. After this weekend, we'll focus on the baby. Just us." "I'd like that," she said. "Oh, by the way, I have my own little event on Friday night, too. My non-profit group is having its annual appreciation dinner. Nothing fancy, just at a hotel downtown." Arthur barely heard her. "That's great, Elle. Sounds nice." "It is. It's at the Criterion, actually. Isn't that a funny coincidence?" Arthur's blood froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. "What? What did you say?" Eleanor smiled, a placid, untroubled expression. "Yes. We're in one of the smaller banquet halls, I think. The Lakeview Room or something. It's just a small dinner for the core volunteers. You'll be in the main ballroom, I assume?" He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Of course. A massive venue like the Criterion would host multiple events. His Midwest Division retreat and her non-profit appreciation dinner. It was a close call, but the lie held. It was perfect in a way. "Exactly," he said, forcing a chuckle. "The main ballroom. We'll probably be in the same building and won't even see each other." "Funny." "Hilarious," she agreed. "Well, I need to go over my speech." "You're giving a speech?" he asked, distracted, already checking his phone for a text from Chloe. "Just a few words of thanks to the volunteers. Nothing important." She smiled, kissed his cheek, and walked out of the study, her hand resting on her stomach. Arthur didn't see her stop in the hallway. He didn't see her close her eyes, take a deep, steadying breath, and look at the reflection of his study door in the hallway mirror. Her expression was not one of gentle naivete. It was one of cold, profound resolution. On Friday, Eleanor's preparation was a world away from Chloe's. There was no frantic shopping. At noon, her assistant, a sharp, efficient man in a bespoke suit named Elias Thorne, arrived at their apartment. Arthur, who was working from home to leave early for Chloe, saw him and scoffed. He'd always seen Elias as a glorified secretary for Eleanor's little hobbies. "Elias, good to see you," Arthur said dismissively. "Helping Eleanor with her little charity auction? Don't let her bid on any macaroni art." "Something like that, Mr. Vance," Elias said, his eyes flat and professional. He was carrying a velvet-lined security case. "Mrs. Hayes has a few items to review." Once Arthur was gone, claiming he had to set up the presentation, Elias opened the case. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a staggering diamond and sapphire necklace, the legendary Celestial Azure by Bulgari. "The piece arrived from the vault, ma'am," Elias said. "Security detail is on standby. The car will be here at 7. We've confirmed the keynote speech is locked at 8 minutes, and the donation from Mr. Reed is confirmed." "Excellent," Eleanor said. She was not the shy volunteer. Her voice was pure command. "And the other matter?" guest list is confirmed," Elias said, checking his tablet. "Mr. Henderson and his wife are seated at table 3. Mr. Daniel Peterson is at table 9. "And Mr. Vance?" Elias paused. "Ma'am, he is, as you predicted, not on the list. Are you certain you wish to proceed?" "He will be," Eleanor said quietly. "He'll be arriving with a +1, a Ms. Chloe Jenkins. I've seen the credit card alert for the dress. See that they are allowed in, Elias. No fuss at the door. I don't just want them in. I want them welcomed. Reserve the high-top table. T12 for them. It's near the stage, but to the side. I want them to have a very clear view." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, that's surgical. Are you certain? The security protocol." "Elias," she said, her voice dropping, not in anger, but in absolute finality. "My husband has made his choices. Now I am making mine. See to it." "Yes, Mrs. Hayes," he said, snapping his tablet shut. The Vance was, for the first time, unspoken. Arthur, in his rented tuxedo, picked Chloe up in a black Uber XL. He'd wanted a limo, but the charge for the dress had pushed his credit card perilously close to its limit. "This is it, Artie," Chloe breathed, adjusting the slit on her dress. She looked electric, her makeup dramatic, her hair piled high. She was a neon sign in a world of gas lamps. "Our new life starts tonight." "Just let me do the talking, baby," Arthur said, his own heart thrumming with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "Act like you've been here before." The Criterion Grand Ballroom was not just a room. It was a testament to Chicago's industrial age wealth. 30-foot ceilings dripped with crystal chandeliers, and the walls were adorned with murals of nymphs and heroes. A full orchestra was playing softly on a raised dais. The air itself seemed to glitter. Arthur, with Chloe clinging to his arm, felt a rush of adrenaline so potent it was almost dizzying. This was it. "Artie." "My God," Chloe whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. The room was filled with men in bespoke tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than Arthur's annual salary. He recognized titans of industry, political figures, even a famous actor. "Told you," Arthur whispered back, straightening his tie. "This is where the real deals are made." He approached the check-in desk, his stomach clenching. A polite young woman looked up. "Good evening, sir. May I have your name?" "Vance," Arthur said, trying to sound bored. "Arthur Vance. I'm here with James Henderson's group." The woman's fingers danced over her tablet. Arthur prepared his follow-up lie, his excuse. It never came. "Ah, yes. Mr. Vance," the woman said, her smile bright and welcoming. "We've been expecting you, and your guest, Ms. Chloe Jenkins." Arthur's shock must have been visible. You have?" "Of course, sir. Mrs. Hayes Vance left specific instructions for your arrival. We have a wonderful table reserved for you, T12. It's just by the stage. Please go right in." He was speechless. He took the embossed table card. Mrs. Hayes Vance? She'd used her married name? She must have known about his retreat and, in an act of pathetic, wifely devotion, called the venue to make sure he was taken care of. He'd almost have to thank her. He felt a surge of pure, unadulterated validation. His lie hadn't even been necessary. He was meant to be her. "What did I tell you?" he murmured to Chloe, who was practically vibrating with excitement. They grabbed champagne from a passing waiter. Chloe, in her daring emerald dress, was already drawing looks. Some were appreciative, but many, especially from the older women in pearls, were tinged with disdain. She was too loud, her dress too revealing for an event of this pedigree. Arthur didn't notice. He was scanning the room, high on the atmosphere. "There's Henderson!" he hissed, spotting his boss near the enormous, ice-sculpted centerpiece. Let's go say hi. Act natural." They navigated the floor. Mr. Henderson, a portly man with a permanently stressed expression, was talking to a tall, silver-haired man. Arthur recognized him instantly. Marcus Reed, the billionaire founder of Reed Industries, a genuine titan and a notorious recluse. "Mr. Henderson, sir," Arthur said, clapping his boss on the back a little too hard. Henderson turned, his eyes widening in confusion. "Vance! What on earth are you doing here?" The bottom dropped out of Arthur's stomach. "Sir, the retreat." "What retreat?" Henderson looked baffled. "This is the Starlight Gala, Vance. My wife has volunteered for this foundation for a decade. This isn't a corporate event. How did you get in?" Before Arthur could stammer out a response, Marcus Reed, the billionaire, smiled warmly. "Don't be hard on the young man, James. The Starlight Foundation is known for its mysterious invitations. They always like to bring in new blood." He extended a hand to Arthur. "Marcus Reed. And you are?" "Arthur Vance, sir. And this is my colleague, Chloe Jenkins." "Colleague," Marcus Reed repeated, his eyes twinkling with an amusement Arthur couldn't decipher. "Vance, you say? From Henderson's firm? Interesting. I've been consulting with your firm recently, but your name never came up. You must be in a very specialized department. The over 70 crowd, perhaps." Arthur's face burned. Reed knew who he was. "Well," Reed continued, giving Chloe a polite, dismissive nod. "Enjoy the evening, Mr. Vance. The founder is a very dear friend of mine. She puts on a spectacular show. The auction items this year are breathtaking." Reed turned back to Henderson, dismissing them completely. Arthur, his face crimson, quickly steered Chloe away. "What the hell was that, Artie?" Chloe hissed, her grip tightening on his arm. "He didn't invite you? And that check-in woman, she said Mrs. Hayes Vance. What is going on?" "Shut up!" Arthur snapped. "He must have forgotten, or his secretary did it. And Eleanor, she must have called ahead for my retreat, and they got the names mixed up. It's fine. Look, we're in, aren't we? That's all that matters. Now let's find our table." T12. He was rattled. He looked back at Marcus Reed, who was now laughing with Henderson. Reed looked up, caught Arthur's eye, and gave him a strange, almost pitying smile before raising his glass in a mock toast. Arthur quickly turned away. He chalked it up to luck. He found their table, a high top, just as promised. The view of the stage was perfect. "See?" he whispered to Chloe, stroking her back. "Best seats in the house. She set it all up for me." Chloe, placated by another glass of champagne, snuggled against him. "Just make sure you introduce me to that Reed guy again. He looks like he's actually worth my time." Arthur gritted his teeth and smiled. The lights began to dim, and a hush fell over the crowd of 500. The orchestra finished with a soft flourish, and the stage lights brightened. A distinguished-looking man stepped up to the podium. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." His voice boomed, rich and warm. "Welcome to the 5th Annual Starlight Foundation Charity Ball. Tonight we celebrate a year of unprecedented success, funding pediatric wings and educational programs across the state. We have already, through your generosity tonight, raised over $20 million. A wave of polite, powerful applause. Chloe's jaw went slack. 20 million? Arthur felt a knot of sweat on his collar. This was bigger than he could have ever imagined. He was completely out of his depth, a minnow in an ocean of whales. His lie about a corporate retreat felt pathetic and small. "Tonight is special," the host continued, his voice softening. "Tonight we are here to build new hospitals, new futures, new foundations." Arthur felt a small, uneasy twitch. Foundations. the word his wife had used. "It is my distinct honor," the man boomed, "to introduce the heart and soul of this foundation, the woman whose vision, and more importantly, whose tireless work and personal generosity made all of this possible. She is a benefactor, a visionary, and a dear, dear friend. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and chairwoman of the Starlight Foundation." Arthur was barely listening. He was scanning the crowd, wondering if he could still salvage the night, maybe slip Henderson his business card. Chloe was fixated on the stage, her eyes gleaming with avarice. This was the world she wanted. A woman who has tirelessly and quietly built an empire of hope. Please give a warm, thunderous welcome to Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, Vance. The name hit Arthur Vance like a physical blow. It was not possible. It was a mistake. A different Eleanor Vance. It had to be. A coincidence. His mind scrambled, trying to find purchase on a reality that was suddenly shifting like sand. He turned his head, a sickening, jerky motion, from the crowd to the stage. The orchestra swelled. The spotlight flared, blinding him. And into that circle of brilliant white light walked his wife. She was not the woman he'd left at home. This was not the simple Eleanor in her maternity overalls, discussing robin's egg blue. This woman was a queen. She wore a custom-made gown of midnight blue velvet, designed to drape elegantly over her 7-month pregnancy. Her hair, which she usually wore in a simple bun, was swept up in a sophisticated chignon, and around her neck. Arthur's vision tunneled. It was the celestial azure, the necklace he had seen in a magazine once, in an article about the world's most priceless gems. It was a necklace with a name. She wasn't just beautiful. She was magnificent. She radiated a power and a confidence he had never seen. She walked to the podium, and the room, filled with billionaires, senators, and socialites, rose to their feet in a deafening standing ovation. Arthur's champagne glass slipped from his numb fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was lost in the applause. "Artie?" Chloe whispered, her voice sharp with confusion. "Artie, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." He couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. His entire world had just tilted on its axis and thrown him into a lightless void. Chloe looked from his ashen face to the woman on stage, who was now smiling, her hand resting on her pregnant belly as she waited for the applause to die down. Chloe's eyes narrowed. She saw the hair, the profile, the pregnancy. "Wait," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a dangerous hiss. The little non-profit dinner? The Lakeview room?" She looked back at Arthur, her painted red lips pulling back into a snarl. "That's her, isn't it?" she breathed, her fantasy crumbling. "That's your wife." Eleanor tapped the microphone, a small, knowing smile on her face. The crowd settled instantly. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was not the soft, gentle murmur he heard at home. It was clear, strong, and carried to every corner of the massive ballroom. It was a voice accustomed to being obeyed. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Eleanor began. "For 5 years, the Starlight Foundation has operated on a simple principle, that the most valuable assets we have are not the ones we keep, but the ones we give away. It's about building a legacy, a foundation." Arthur was paralyzed. Every head in the room was on his wife. He saw his boss, James Henderson, watching her with open admiration. He saw Marcus Reed, the billionaire, looking at her with an expression of deep, personal affection. "This year is, of course, very special to me," Eleanor continued, and her hand moved to her stomach. "I'm preparing to build a new foundation. A human one." The crowd chuckled warmly. It has made me think deeply about the world we are building for our children, and I've come to realize that a foundation, whether for a building, a charity, or a family, cannot survive if it is built on a compromised framework. It cannot survive with a rotted core. Chloe grabbed Arthur's arm, her nails digging into his skin. What is she talking about? I don't know, Arthur lied, but he knew. He knew. A few years ago, Eleanor said, her voice becoming intimate, I decided to build a new house, a new life. I had the blueprints. I had the land. I wanted it to be a partnership. So, I found a builder. This builder, he looked the part. He had a shiny truck and a confident smile. He talked a good game. He talked about leveraged assets and market trends, when all I needed was for him to be good and true. The room was silent, captivated by her metaphor. Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. So I gave him the keys, Eleanor continued. I trusted him with the budget. I trusted him with the foundation. And for a while the facade looked beautiful. The paint was fresh, the lawn was green. But I started to notice discrepancies. Small things at first. Bills for materials that never arrived. Hours billed for work that was never done. And a terrible, hollow sound when I knocked on the walls. Her eyes, brilliant under the lights, began to scan the crowd. Arthur felt an animal instinct to hide, to shrink. He was in a spotlight of his own, a dark, negative space of his own making. Then her eyes found him. Across the vast, opulent room, through the glittering assembly, her gaze locked directly onto his. It was not the warm, forgiving look of his wife. It was the cold, appraising stare of a CEO identifying a bad investment. She held his gaze for 1, 2, 3 agonizing seconds. She saw him. She saw the shattered glass at his feet, and she saw Chloe, clinging to his arm in her $4,800 emerald green dress. Without flinching, Eleanor smiled. It was the most terrifying smile Arthur had ever seen. She then looked away, dismissing him, and addressed the crowd at large. So, what do you do when you discover the rot is in the very foundation? Do you cover it up with new paint? Do you hope it goes away? No. You tear it down. You tear it all down, to the studs, and you expose the rot to the light. You get rid of the compromised materials. You file for the right permits, and you start again, this time with integrity. A shiver went through the room. This was more than a standard charity speech. This had teeth. The Starlight Foundation will not collapse, she declared, her voice ringing with power. Because it is built on truth. It is built by all of you. By your truth. By your generosity. And tonight I am overwhelmed. I want to personally thank my dear friend and mentor, Marcus Reed, for his staggering $10 million matching donation for the new Eleanor Hayes pediatric wing. The room erupted. Marcus Reed stood up and blew her a small kiss. Chloe finally let go of Arthur's arm. Her entire body was trembling with rage. But it wasn't the rage of a woman scorned. It was the rage of a grifter who'd been played. You, she whispered, her voice venomous. You told me she was nobody. You told me you were the successful one. You brought me here to her party in a dress she paid for. She gestured to the credit card receipt he'd so foolishly left on his desk. She'd seen it. You're not a big shot. You're just her husband. The last word was spat like a curse. Arthur couldn't respond. He just stared at the stage as his wife, his Eleanor, concluded her speech. Thank you, she finished. Enjoy your evening. And please bid generously. Our children are counting on it. Another standing ovation. As Eleanor walked off the stage, she was immediately enveloped by Marcus Reed, who kissed her on both cheeks and by James Henderson, Arthur's boss, who was bowing like a courtier. The music swelled. The gala was continuing. But for Arthur Vance, the world had ended. The social annihilation was immediate and absolute. It was as if a silent alarm had been tripped. The people at the surrounding tables, who had previously ignored them, now cast sidelong glances, their expressions a mixture of pity and utter contempt. They had seen it all: the shattered glass, Arthur's ashen face, Chloe's theatrical fury, and, most importantly, Eleanor's cold, precise stare from the stage. "Get me out of here," Chloe hissed, shoving Arthur toward the exit. "Wait, Chloe, I can explain." "Explain what? Explain that you're a pathetic liar? That your simple little wife is the richest woman in the room? You didn't bring me here to show me off, Arthur. You brought me here to be humiliated." "I didn't know," he cried, his voice cracking, a desperate half-truth. "I swear I had no idea. She told me she was a volunteer." As they stumbled toward the grand exit, their path was suddenly blocked. It wasn't the hotel security. It was Elias Thorne, Eleanor's assistant, flanked by two imposing men in dark suits. "Mr. Vance," Elias said, his voice polite but unyielding. "Ms. Jenkins, there appears to be a problem with your invitation." "What?" "No, we were on the list," Arthur protested weakly. "At T12, your woman said—" "Ah, yes, table 12, Elias said with a thin smile. "The termination table, we call it. A special reservation. I'm afraid your presence is no longer required. The corporate retreat has been cancelled. Permanently." "Please," Arthur begged, his mind racing. He had to fix this. "Elias, listen. This is a misunderstanding. Chloe she's my cousin, from out of town. She's Sophia. I brought her to meet Eleanor as a surprise." Chloe, who had been furious, now looked at him with a new, deeper level of disgust. Elias Thorne actually laughed, a single sharp, "Ha. Your cousin, Sophia? That's disappointing, Arthur. I expected a better lie, given your recent track record." He gestured. The two guards stepped forward, each taking an arm. "No, wait! You can't do this!" Arthur yelled. "Ms. Jenkins," Elias said, ignoring him. "A word of advice. I'd have a very good lawyer look at the bill for that dress. Mrs. Hayes has a rather aggressive legal team when it comes to fraudulent use of her accounts." Chloe went pale. The fight drained out of her, replaced by pure, cold panic. It was a nightmare. They weren't just leaving. They were being removed. The guards flanked them, guiding them firmly through the sea of whispering socialites. Arthur saw his boss, Henderson, look over. Henderson saw the guards, saw Arthur's face, and just shook his head in disgust before pointedly turning his back. It was over. His career, his reputation, evaporated. They were marched through the gilded lobby, past the check-in desk, and pushed unceremoniously through the main doors into the cold November night. The rain had started, a miserable, freezing drizzle. Chloe, her emerald dress already darkening with rain, her hair ruined, turned on him. "Chloe, please," Arthur begged, reaching for her. I can fix this. I'll file for divorce. I'll get half of her money. We can—" Slap. The sound echoed on the wet pavement. Chloe struck him so hard, his head snapped to the side, his cheek stinging from the impact and the cold. "Half her money?" she shrieked, the last shred of her glamour dissolving. "You think a woman like that, a woman who built that," she gestured back at the fortress-like hotel, "who just gave a speech about tearing down rot, doesn't have an ironclad prenuptial agreement. You're not just a liar, Arthur. You're a fool. You had a queen, and you threw her away for me." She was right. He knew, in that sickening moment, that she was absolutely right. Eleanor, the quiet, methodical planner, would never have left a single thread loose. "Don't you ever," Chloe snarled, jabbing a finger in his chest, "ever speak to me again. You've ruined me. You've ruined yourself." She turned, kicked off her ridiculously expensive, and now he realized, unpaid for, heels, and stormed barefoot down the street, hailing a taxi with a desperate, shaky hand. Arthur Vance stood alone on the curb, his rented tuxedo soaked. He checked his pocket for his phone. He had to call Eleanor. He had to apologize. He had to... What? He pulled it out, his hands trembling. He had 34 missed texts from work colleagues, and a new email from Elias, thornyhayesfoundation.org, subject, Notice of Intent and Termination of Residency. Sent 7:15 p.m. Arthur, by the time you read this, the locks on the apartment at Lakeshore Drive will have been changed. Your personal effects are being couriered to your office at Henderson and Locke. A petition for divorce on the grounds of adultery has been filed. You will be served by Monday morning. All joint credit cards, including the one you used at Boutique Name for the sum of $4,800, have been cancelled. That debt is now yours alone. Furthermore, a forensic accounting of the joint accounts has been initiated. Any funds determined to have been used for extramarital purposes, $37,450, so 12 over 6 months, will be clawed back in the divorce settlement. Do not attempt to contact Mrs. Hayes Vance. All future communication will be through her legal counsel. We wish you well in your future endeavors. Arthur's knees buckled. He leaned against a stone pillar, the rain plastering his hair to his face. He looked at the timestamp, 7:15 p.m. Before he had even arrived, she knew, she had known all along, the entire night, the welcoming check-in, the special table, the speech, the humiliation, the guards. It wasn't a discovery. It was a judgment. It was an execution. He tried to go home. He took a taxi to their luxury apartment building. As he walked toward the door, the night doorman, Frank, a man who had accepted his Christmas tips for 3 years, stepped in front of him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance," Frank said, his face impassive. "I have strict instructions. You are not to enter. Mrs. Hayes's legal team was here this evening. You are no longer a resident." "Frank, come on. It's me," Arthur pleaded. "My instructions are absolute, sir. A car is waiting to take you to a hotel for the night. It has been prepaid." It was the final, crushing humiliation. He wasn't just divorced. He was handled. The days that followed were a systematic dismantling of the life Arthur Vance thought he had. He arrived at his office on Monday at 9 a.m., haggard and wearing a rumpled suit he'd bought at a 24-hour department store. His personal effects, a single cardboard box with a desk plant, a few framed photos of him and Eleanor, which he quickly turned face down, and his replica watch were waiting for him on his chair. His computer was dark. His access key was deactivated. By 9:05 a.m., Henderson's secretary, a woman who had always been kind to him, looked at him with cold pity. "Mr. Henderson will see you, in the main boardroom." The boardroom? He walked in. It wasn't just Henderson. 2 senior partners, Mr. Locke and Ms. Albright, were there. And a 4th man in a shark-skin suit he didn't recognize. "Vance," Henderson said, not bothering to sit down. "Pack your desk. You're finished." "Sir, please, it was a misunderstanding. My wife and I—" "Your wife?" Ms. Albright, the firm's legal counsel, cut him off. Her voice was like ice. "You mean Eleanor Hayes, the woman who founded Hayes Tech, the woman who, at 28, sold her patent portfolio to a tech conglomerate for a sum I am legally not allowed to say, but which has 9 zeros in it. That wife?" Arthur was speechless. He'd thought her inheritance was a few 100,000. "You idiot!" Henderson roared, his face purple. "The Starlight Foundation isn't just a charity. It's her personal endowment. The Hayes Foundation is one of our firm's single largest institutional clients. She gave us the business as a favor when she married you, to give you some, I don't know, dignity. And how do you repay her? You didn't just cheat on your wife, Arthur," Locke, the numbers man, said quietly, looking at a spreadsheet. "You jeopardized this entire company. Marcus Reed is a personal friend of hers. He was considering moving his $500 million family fund to us. Was. After Friday's performance, he has decided to, and I quote, seek management from adults." The man in the sharkskin suit stepped forward and placed a thick folder on the table. "Mr. Vance, I am from the firm's external counsel. We are terminating your employment for cause, based on a gross violation of the company's morals clause, and for actions constituting a severe conflict of interest that has resulted in material damages to the firm." "Material damages?" "The loss of the Reed account," Henderson snapped. "Get out. If you try to fight this, we will publicly release the reason for your termination. I don't think any other firm in this city will hire you when they know you defrauded Eleanor Hayes." Arthur, carrying his small cardboard box, was walked out of the building. He spent the next weeks in a haze, living in a soul-crushing extended-stay hotel. The legal papers arrived, served by a terrifyingly expensive lawyer. The prenuptial agreement he'd signed, the one he'd assumed was a formality, was a fortress. He was entitled to nothing. Not only that, but the debt he had accumulated trying to impress Chloe, the dress, the dinners, the secret trips, was now solely his. He was ruined. He saw Chloe one last time. She was on a local tabloid news segment, trying to sell her tell-all story. She looked cheap and desperate under the harsh studio lights. "He lied to me," she was saying. "He tricked me. I'm a victim here, just as much as Eleanor is." The host cut her off. "Right. But let's be honest, Miss Jenkins. You knew he was a married man. The real story here is Eleanor Hayes, a true class act." No one cared about Chloe. No one cared about Arthur. They were footnotes in the triumph of Eleanor Hayes. 1 year later, the name Arthur Vance was effectively a ghost. The man himself was almost unrecognizable. He lived in a grey fourth-floor studio apartment in a sprawling complex near the interstate, a place that smelled of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. The constant, dull roar of traffic was his only companion. The man who had once discussed macroeconomic trends now worked in a vast, fluorescent-lit cubicle farm in a suburban office park for a company called Apex Medical Solutions. His job, procured after 6 humiliating months of unemployment, was to cold call dental offices and try to sell them bulk orders of disposable bibs and latex gloves. He was, by every conceivable metric, a failure. The sharp suits were gone, replaced by ill-fitting, sweat-stained polyester. He had gained 40 pounds, a soft, pale armor of self-loathing. He sat at his desk, his headset pinching his ears, a plastic cup of lukewarm water sweating onto his desk. It was 12:30 p.m., his mandatory 30-minute lunch break. He was eating a crushed protein bar from a vending machine, to escape the din of 100 other voices on the sales floor. "Yes, Dr. Miller, but our value per unit is unmatched." He put in his earbuds and idly scrolled through the Chicago Business News. That's when he saw it. The headline was, "Chicago's Quiet Titan. Eleanor Hayes' 100-mit division opens today." His heart, which he'd assumed had atrophied, gave a painful, violent lurch. He clicked the link. A professionally produced video began to play. There was Eleanor. She was standing on a sun-drenched plaza in front of a breathtaking structure of glass and white stone. She wasn't just sleek, she was a force of nature. She wore a royal blue dress that was both professional and impossibly chic. Her hair was cut in a sharp, modern bob. She was flanked by the mayor, a US senator, and Marcus Reed. They weren't just standing with her, they were orbiting her. She was the sun. "Mrs. Hayes Vance," a reporter began. "Just Hayes," Eleanor corrected, her voice clear and resonant, amplified by the microphones. "I've reclaimed my name." The reporter didn't miss a beat. "Ms. Hayes, the Eleanor Hayes Wing for Pediatric Innovation is being called a marvel. What does this day mean to you?" Eleanor smiled, a genuine, brilliant smile that Arthur had never, not once, received. "It means," she said, "that we've stopped accepting good enough. It means that the children of this city will have a foundation of care built on integrity, transparency, and the absolute best technology we can create." Arthur's protein bar turned to ash in his mouth. Integrity. Foundation. Her words from the Gala. It hadn't just been a speech to humiliate him, it was a genuine, unshakable mission statement. "And as a new mother yourself," the reporter continued, "this must feel incredibly personal." "It is," Eleanor said. A moment later, an assistant, the sharp, ever-present Elias Thorne, stepped forward, handing her a beautiful, bright-eyed baby boy. The child, perhaps 10 months old, was dressed in a tiny, smart outfit. He had her eyes. "This," Eleanor said, her voice softening for the first time as she kissed the baby's head, "is my son, Theodore Hayes." The reporter, fishing, asked, "No middle name? No father's name?" Eleanor's smile was polite, but edged with steel. "My son carries my name, the name that built this." The camera panned to the side of the building, where, carved into the granite facade in letters 3 feet high, it read, "The Eleanor Hayes Wing." Arthur made a sound, a choked, wet gasp. The man in the next cubicle, a senior sales rep named Gary, glanced over in annoyance. "You okay there, Artie?" Gary muttered, not looking away from his screen. Arthur couldn't answer. He was watching his entire life pivot on the axis of this one catastrophic miscalculation. He flashed back to Eleanor, 7 months pregnant, sitting on their floor, patiently trying to assemble a baby stroller. He remembered her asking about Robin's egg blue. He remembered his snap of irritation, his bored dismissal, his urgent need to get back to texting Chloe. He hadn't just cheated on a nice woman. He had betrayed a titan. He hadn't just lied to his wife. He had lied to the single most important person he had ever, or would ever, meet. He, Arthur Vance, a man who prided himself on reading the market, had failed to see the 9-0 fortune, the steel trap mind, and the world-changing ambition sitting right across his own dinner table. All because she wasn't loud, like Chloe. He thought he was the one with ambition. His ambition had been to rent a tuxedo and sneak into a party. Her ambition was to build hospitals. The video ended. Arthur sat, paralyzed, as the sales floor sounds rushed back in, the phones, the typing, the desperate, fake cheerful voices. He was a leech who had been discovered, and calmly, methodically, and painlessly scraped away. He wasn't even a villain in her story. He was a footnote, a bad line item that had been audited, corrected, and deleted. "Vance!" a voice roared. It was his manager, a man half his age. "Your break was over 2 minutes ago. Are you building a sandcastle or are you selling bibs? Get back on the phones. Now!" Arthur fumbled for his headset, his hands shaking, his face burning with a shame so profound it was suffocating. "Yes, sir," he whispered. That evening, In a penthouse apartment that overlooked the city and her new hospital, Eleanor Hayes finished a video call. Marcus Reed's face smiled from the large screen on her study wall. "The board is ecstatic, Elle," Marcus said. "The senator is already fast-tracking the zoning for the research center. You've done it again." "We've done it, Marcus," she corrected, rocking Theodore in her arms. "And the other matter? The Henderson and Locke settlement?" "Finalized this morning," Marcus reported. "Their firm paid a $2.5 million penalty to the foundation for let's call it, the conflict of interest. They were lucky we didn't dismantle them completely. You were merciful." Eleanor looked down at her son, who was drifting to sleep. "Mercy is for people who make a mistake, Marcus. What happened was a systemic failure. This was just a market correction, a necessary one." Her voice was calm, devoid of anger or bitterness. It was the voice of a CEO closing a file. "So, partner," Marcus said, his voice warm. "What's next? You've built the wing. You've secured the research center. The world, I presume." Eleanor smiled, looking out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city lights, at the bright, new beacon of her hospital wing, glittering in the distance. She kissed her son's head. "We're not taking the world, Marcus," she said. "We're building a new one." And that's the story of how one man's deceitful climb to the top led him to rock bottom, all at the hands of the woman he so grossly underestimated. It's a powerful reminder that true strength often lies in quiet integrity, and that lies, no matter how well constructed, will always crumble in the face of the truth. What did you think of Arthur's shocking downfall? Have you ever seen someone underestimate a person, only to be completely stunned by who they truly were? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories about justice and shocking reveals, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to see it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss a single one of our real-life dramas. We have new stories coming every week, and you won't want to miss what's next.